In my opinion, lamb is one of the best cuts of meat. When it's slowly cooked, all of those flavors release and it literally melts in your mouth. With this, we're gonna be doing a nice little cumin and maple glaze or a braised sauce. So when it goes in the oven, it's gonna get cooked into that. All of those flavors are gonna release and mix together, building that flavor friendship, and we're just gonna have a fantastic meal at the end of it. So let's get straight into it. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Alright, let's start as always with the prep, and for that here is 2 brown or yellow onions that have been peeled with the tips and roots removed. All we need to do with these is slice them in half, slice each half into quarters, rotate 90 degrees and slice into even sized chunks. Here is 5 cloves of freshly peeled garlic that we can lay on the chopping board, place the side of our knife on top with the blade facing down and push down to crush, which will activate the flavour compound that's called allicin. Then give this a quick rough chop just to break it up a bit, and it doesn't need to be super fine or anything like that. For an optional ingredient, get yourself 1 large long red chilli. This can have its stem removed, which can be placed into compost, and with the chilli itself, this can either be thinly sliced like what I'm doing here, or you can slice it in half lengthways, leaving it on the larger side. I say this is optional as I know some of you don't like chilli, but in this sauce it's extremely subtle and adds fantastic flavour. Now here we have half a bunch of silver beet or chard, which is a close relative of spinach and beetroot, but tastes nothing like beetroot, so don't worry if that was about to turn you off. Obviously this is quite large, so you can either slice it in half or into quarters, but don't go too small because it does become very small once it's being cooked. Last but not least, we want 40 grams or 1.4 ounces of pistachio nuts, obviously out of their shell too, and I tried to do a cool transition here which failed miserably. With your nuts, give them a quick rough chop to lightly break them up, and these are going to be used as a topping which we will make later on in the recipe. Place a large pot over a medium-high heat. Once hot, add in 1 tablespoon or 20 milliliters of olive oil, then gently place in 4 lamb shanks in total, doing 2 at a time for better searing, and sear for 6 minutes, moving them around regularly to obtain a nice browning all over. These can also be quite hard to grab with tongs, so just be careful you don't drop it and have oil splash back at you. Anyway, once that's done, remove the browned lamb, placing it into a bowl and proceed with the remaining batch. Once that's all done, to the same pot, add in the chopped onion, and whilst moving it regularly, saute for 2 minutes, just until it starts to slightly brown, and pick up the flavours left behind from the lamb. Add in 1.5 tablespoons or 15 grams of whole cumin seeds for a nice strong earthy warmth, also adding in the roughly chopped crushed garlic, and again moving it regularly, saute for 1 minute, which will start to toast the cumin, extracting more flavour, and allow the garlic to become very fragrant. Next, add in the sliced or half chilli if you're using it, 1/4 cup, plus 2 teaspoons or 70 milliliters of maple syrup, which is going to create a beautiful rich sweet molasses-like flavour, 2 1/4 cups or 560 milliliters of chicken stock to create the sauce, and sea salt flakes to taste. Let's then give this all a really good mix for those flavours to become friends and bring this to a boil. Also, I just want to quickly say that the maple syrup is not flavoured syrup, which is pretty much just sugar water. This is the real stuff, and even though it is sweet, it doesn't ruin or overpower this recipe at all, and it is perfectly balanced. With this at a boil, let's then play a game of Tetris with the seared lamb shanks, strategically placing them in the pot so they're not all sitting on top of one another, then pour over enough chicken stock to just sit under the top of the lamb shanks, with myself adding in an extra 180 milliliters or 3/4 cup's worth, then place on a lid or foil if you don't have a lid, and transfer to a preheated oven set at 200 degrees Celsius or 390 degrees Fahrenheit and braise for 1 hour undisturbed. 1 hour later, very carefully remove the pot from the oven, placing it onto the stovetop or any heat resistant surface, carefully remove the lid, and use a spoon to give this all a spin to keep those flavours moving, working and developing, being gentle with the lamb. Once you've spun the deck, flip over the lamb, allowing the opposite side to now be poking out, place the lid back on and take it back over to the oven, which is still on the same temperature, and braise for another hour undisturbed. In the meantime, place a pan over a high heat, add in 1 tablespoon or 20 milliliters of olive oil, and add in the roughly chopped pistachio nuts, 40 grams or 1.4 ounces of flaked almonds, and a pinch of sea salt flakes to taste. Now with this, keep it moving around and toast for 1.5 to 2 minutes, just until it starts to brown and become golden. Also, for a good tip, keep your nuts off the side of the pan as they will burn very quickly as the edges are thinner and contain more heat. Once you've done and you have something that looks like this, remove it and let them cool. Going back to the lamb after the second hour, carefully remove it again and place it over a medium-high heat on the stovetop and remove the lid. Let's then very gently scoop out the lamb, placing it onto a plate and setting it aside for the time being, and I recommend using a large spoon as tongs will break it all apart. With this now, give the sauce a nice mix through, allowing it to come to a boil in the process, and once boiling, add in the chopped silver beet, giving it all a good mix through, and whilst mixing regularly, cook it for 2 minutes, just until the green leaves are nicely wilted and soft. Add in 1 can or 400 grams or 14.1 ounces of rinsed chickpeas, again giving it another good mix through, and cook for 1 minute to ensure the chickpeas are hot in the center and start absorbing some of that sauce. It's also a good time to check and adjust seasoning levels accordingly, then remove it from the stovetop. Now you can do this however you'd like, but I recommend placing down the nicely wilted silver beet first, then over the top, gently lay over that incredible lamb, with this recipe serving 4 hungry people. Spoon over the chickpeas and delicious rich sauce, garnish with the crunchy toasted nut mix to add a nice texture and background flavour, and you can also garnish this with some chopped parsley if you wish to do so. This then leaves us with this incredibly beautiful and delicious maple and cumin succulent lamb shanks topped with that crunchy toasted nut mix. The only thing that's then left to do is show you how tender and soft that lamb is, and then of course, to make this all worthwhile, we can then dig in.
This thing is making me sigh.